So this week, I put out a Substack and a podcast. The Substack was in reaction to the Super Bowl halftime show, which was really divisive for our country. And I was not so much paying attention to what was being said, though, I definitely took that into consideration, but more about how it was being said and um, some of the things behind what was being said. And so what I noticed is that for a lot of people, it was that their feelings really took over. And their feelings took over because there was no language around what they were feeling. Because for the first time in football, Super Bowl history, we had a halftime show that was not in English. And for a lot of people, that was it was threatening. And so we saw a lot of backlash from that. We saw a lot of people who were trying to stand firm in what they saw as normal. And I wanted to talk a bit about that. And so you can go check out my Substack, which the title of that Substack is What the Super Bowl Halftime Show Taught Us About Emotional Literacy. And it's all about language, reaction, and belonging. But what I want to talk to you about today is the blog that I wrote about when feelings take over because there is no language. And that, I think, is what's happening a lot. And I want to point this out again, is that about not having any language is not about the inability to speak. A lot of us speak. We use a lot of words. But when I say there is no language, what I'm really getting at to this point is there is no emotional literacy. There is no understanding about why we feel the way we feel. So let me go ahead and dive into that over here. And I'm just going to read to you what I wrote. So for many of us, the problem has never been that we feel too much. The problem is that we feel deeply, intensely, and often all at once, without having been given a way to translate those feelings into anything usable. When emotions arrive without language, they don't move through us like they are supposed to do. They settle in and take roots, making our inner landscape their home. They blur the edges between what we are feeling and who we are. And this is especially true with heavier emotions like anger, sadness, or fear. These feelings have weight, they demand attention. Without a learned way to express them, they can begin to consume our internal landscape instead of experiencing emotion. We become merged with it. We stop saying, I feel angry, and start living as if I am angry. And the distinction may seem subtle, but psychologically and neurologically, it is enormous. What often gets labeled as being too emotional is actually something much quieter and more structural, a lack of language. When there's no framework for naming what is happening inside us, the nervous system stays activated. The emotion has no outlet or completion. It simply loops. The longer it loops, the harder it becomes to step back and ask what the feeling is trying to communicate. And this does not happen because people are incapable or unwilling to talk. It happens because many of us were never taught that emotions are meant to be translated. For those of us raised by parents who believe that strong emotions were disruptive, manipulative, or something to be punished, expression was often shut down long before understanding could form. Phrases like, I'll give you something to cry about, or being sent away to calm down without guidance, taught us that feelings were problems to be contained, not messages to be understood. As children, we learned quickly that the safest option was silence. As adults, that silence often turns inward. So when emotions show up now, especially in moments of stress, conflict, or loss, we don't instinctively reach out for curiosity. We brace and try to endure, or we drown. This is why so many people feel lost inside their emotions. Not because the emotions are wrong, but because there is nothing standing between the feeling and the self. Without language to act as a buffer between the two, emotion becomes identity. And this is where emotional literacy begins. Not by eliminating emotion, but by creating enough distance to listen to it. And for many people, the resistance to naming emotions comes from the idea that naming something means taking ownership of it. We are often taught that to name something is to claim responsibility for it. If you say, I feel angry, then we are expected to control it, justify it, or fix it. If you name sadness, you risk being told to explain it, minimize it, or move past it. So instead, many people learn a quieter strategy. Don't name it at all. The belief goes something like this. If I don't label it, then it isn't mine to deal with. If I don't put words to it, maybe it won't count. And maybe it won't demand anything of me. But this is where the logic breaks down. When an emotion goes unnamed, it does not stop existing. Ignoring a problem has never made it disappear. And emotions are no different. Being unwilling or unable to label what we are feeling does not neutralize the emotion. And this is what I saw. I'm pausing here for a moment. This is what I saw in the conversations around the Super Bowl halftime show is that a lot of people were reacting in anger, but it really wasn't anger. It was fear. It was that sense of I no longer belong here. This no longer represents me. But people were not able to really say that. And instead they reacted in anger. They reacted in ways that were very volatile. And so we see that this unwillingness to face what they were actually feeling came out in other ways. And so suppressing that fear, suppressing that sense of not belonging anymore, didn't make those feelings disappear or make them feel any better. Instead, it came out as anger and it created an environment that was hateful and racist and very, in a lot of ways, xenophobic. So many of us were taught this reaction, and we were taught this as a survival strategy. We learned early on that expressing emotion made things harder for the people around us, not easier. So we swallowed it and stayed quiet. We learned to be fine. And at least for a while, that may have worked. It kept the peace and it reduced conflict. It made us more manageable and palatable. But suppression is not resolution, and it's not sustainable. An emotion that is suppressed does not dissolve. It waits and builds through the body. We see it through reactivity to everything, which is exactly what we saw during the Super Bowl halftime show. We see it in exhaustion, anxiety, burnout, and it even manifests as physical symptoms, like that upset stomach. This is the cost of silence. And when we do not give an emotion language or attention, we do not gain control over it. We lose the opportunity to understand it, respond to it, and care for it in a healthy way. And the feeling remains present, but now it exists without context, without boundaries, and without support. Naming an emotion does not make it bigger. It is about making it visible enough to work with. It's the difference between carrying something blindly and holding it in your hands where you can actually see what it is asking for. Naming an emotion is not about blame or self-judgment. It's not a moral claim. It is a regulatory act. It creates a relationship between you and the feeling instead of allowing the feeling to take over the entire internal landscape. Language does not mean this is who I am. It means this is what is happening. And that distinction is what allows choice to return. On my blog, I posted the feelings wheel, and I actually think I've talked about this topic before, but I really feel that it's important because, again, I'm still reading a lot about how people reacted to the Super Bowl halftime show. And notice I use the word reacted instead of felt because a lot of people are not truly feeling what they're feeling. They're reacting to what they're feeling. And the reactions typically are not that healthy, right? And a lot of that is because people don't validate their emotions. They don't just accept saying, hey, I'm feeling abandoned here, or I'm feeling a little inferior, or I'm disappointed that I don't feel included, or, hey, I'm appalled at this, or, um, I am, feeling disrespected. Or even in some cases, some people may feel betrayed. And if they were to just look at these things, they would be able to get down to the core of the message that's sending, saying, hey, I'm sad. Or, you know what, I'm disgusted. Or I'm angry. But for a lot of people, they don't want to admit those things because for a lot of us, we were taught that to admit those things are moral failures. They're a failure on our part. It is a character flaw. And I want to just tell you something right now. All feelings are valid. It's really what we do with them that matters. And so if you get a chance to go over to my blog on my website, glance at the feelings wheel. And I know at first it can feel overwhelming. And that's because, these outer edges of the feelings wheel, they're packed with descriptive words and adjectives that we use in everyday language when we talk about how we feel. Um, and these are often words that come most naturally to us because they are specific and situational. But as you move inward on the wheel, something important happens. Those specific descriptors begin to collapse into broader emotional categories. What looks like dozens of different feelings at the surface level that can feel overwhelming and make it difficult to really come to terms with them. Um, Eventually, they distill down into much smaller sets of core emotional states. And those are surprised, bad, fearful, angry, disgusted, sad, and happy. And this isn't about oversimplifying our human experience. It's about recognizing patterns in how the nervous system communicates. What the wheel shows us is that many of the words we use to describe our inner experiences are actually variations of the same underlying signal. So we see, from unity, diversity, and we see the harmony of diversity in its unity. So, for example, you might notice yourself thinking, I feel disrespected. And when you trace it inward on the wheel, you can see that disrespected falls under anger. And that doesn't mean that you are an angry person. It just simply means that something in your environment or an interaction has crossed a boundary. And your body's responding to that violation by mobilizing energy. And from there, a different kind of inquiry becomes possible. Why do I feel angry right now? What specifically feels disrespectful? And what value or limit or need is being ignored here? So instead of staying stuck in the intensity of the feeling, language allows you to move into meaning. And in this case, anger may be calling you to set a clearer boundary or to advocate for yourself. It may be asking you to treat yourself with the respect that wasn't offered to you in that moment. And so these are moments worth paying attention to because in those moments we start to gain a better understanding of ourselves. And this is why I encourage my readers, my listeners, now my watchers since I have a podcast, to actually spend time with this feelings wheel, not as a diagnostic tool or a way to label yourself, but as a reference point while you're learning the language of your emotional experience. So I want to invite you again over there. Check it out. Save the image. And so I want to go back to something I said earlier. Every emotion is valid, and what we do with it is what matters. And this is, this is something that I say often. And the reason for that is because when we allow our emotions to take over, when we allow our emotions to be in the driver's seat, what ends up happening is one of two things. We either say or do things that we later regret, or we are easily manipulated into doing things with our emotions. And that's particularly prevalent now. A lot of our media focuses on rage bait, right? Because rage bait gets clicks, and clicks generates income. Views generate income. And so people will intentionally put out emotionally provocative material because they know they can get a reaction from you. And if they can get a reaction from you, they can make money off of that. And so when we sit with our emotions, whether they be anger or grief or fear, what we want to be able to do is to recognize what that emotion is, even if we're feeling a lot of the different ways that emotion shows up. If we could say, you know what, okay, I've got all these things going on, but really this is anger or this is sadness, then what we can do from there is start to ask ourselves some questions about, what do I need in this moment right now? What do I need in order to make a good decision? How can I create the outcome that I want to see in this? And here's the thing, is none of that is possible without language. And so that's why naming things matters so deeply. When emotions remain vague and unspoken, they tend to loom like monsters in a dark room. They look shadowy and threatening and unpredictable. And they feel as though they can jump out at any time and tear us apart. But when we turn the light on and say, oh, this is what you are, something changes. The monster doesn't necessarily vanish, but it doesn't suddenly become harmless either, but it becomes knowable. And this is where I return to the monster metaphor that I often use. Once named, the monster is no longer a faceless terror peering at us from the corner. It becomes more approachable, becomes less threatening, and maybe it's still prickly. Maybe its quills are up, like a porcupine protecting itself, but it's no longer unknowable. And when something is no longer unknowable, it no longer has absolute power over us. And that's the power of language. And so I want to close with saying this: emotions are here to help us, not to hurt us. And these are especially true for the heavy ones. Every emotion serves a purpose, even the ones that feel bad and we wish would go away. They're not design flaws or inconveniences. They are signs that something is wrong, or something is needs to be addressed internally. And they exist because at a fundamental level, they help us survive and adapt and respond to the world around us. And many of them are protective in nature. They are signals meant to interrupt autopilot and say, hey, pay attention, something here matters. And so there is a growing body of research, including works explored by Leonard Laudanow in his book Emotional, that looks at emotions from an evolutionary perspective. And I'm not going to unpack the science here in depth, but here's the core insight that I do want to bring out here, and that's emotions evolved because they help us improve the situations we are in. They push us towards action when something is wrong, and they encourage us to continue behaviors that support connection, safety, and well being when things are right. And happiness reinforces what nourishes us. It tells us this works, so keep going. The heavier emotions do something different. Anger alerts us to injustice or violation. Fear tells us to pause and assess risk. Sadness and grief slow us down so we can process loss, change, or disconnection. And stress, or the exhaustion signal, tells us that something in our environment or expectations is unsustainable. So when that emotion shows up, especially the uncomfortable ones, so just like they do when you see the news on the Benito Bowl, the Bad Bunny halftime show, those feelings often pop up because whatever is happening is significant enough to deserve our attention. It's an invitation to step back, reassess, and move into problem solving rather than collapse, suppression, or reactivity. And this is where language becomes so essential. When we can name what we're feeling, we create space between the emotion and our response. And that space is where choice lives. That's where we stop being driven entirely by the feeling and start working with it instead. So we're not dismissing it and we're not going to indulge it, but we're going to listen long enough to understand what it's asking for. And so the takeaway here isn't what should we do to try to feel less? It's that we need better ways to relate to what we feel. And so when we give them language, we give ourselves the ability to respond with intention rather than impulse. And that is where healing starts and personal agency returns. That is where emotions can finally do the job that they were meant to do. So the next time that you are online, and you are reading through all of these angry comments, I hope that you can now at least approach it with this lens of they don't have the language to say what they're feeling. They're going to regurgitate what they've read online or what they've heard on their news of choice. And they don't have the emotional literacy to really understand where that feeling is coming from, why they're feeling the way they feel. And hopefully that will give you the ability to either respond in a way that will help you to create the environment you want to see or keep scrolling. But if you have not yet, please head on over and check out my new Substack letter. And then afterwards, head on over to my podcast and give that a listen. So from this point on, what I'll be doing is I'm going to continue on with my weekly Substack letters. Every other week, I will do a blog on my website. And on the weeks I don't do a blog, I'll be doing a podcast. So plenty of ways to keep you engaged, plenty of ways to continue to talk about language, the importance of developing language. And then here pretty soon, March 21st, right here in South Carolina, I'm going to be hosting my very first workshop, and I'm calling it the Scream and Cuddle Workshop. And so, what is the Scream and Cuddle Workshop? Well, sometimes language words are not enough. Sometimes we just need to scream it out. So, if you have been feeling the frustration of this past year, if you are carrying stress or tension or anger with you into the spring, we are going to spring clean and we're going to get that out. So, we're going to go through. I'll have a small educational portion where we're going to talk about the importance of just having a good scream. And then we will have a moment to do some vocalizing. So if that's screaming for you, that's great. But if you're not up for screaming, you want to hum or vocalize in some other way, everything's welcome. Afterwards, we will have a wonderful guided meditation as well as like a bit of stretching to help to regulate our nervous systems a bit. Some light refreshments that are going to be supplied by South Carolina Horror Convention. Thank you to them for sponsoring us. And then afterwards, we are going to head over to the Cotton Branch Farm Refuge, and we're going to cuddle pigs because while it is important for us to definitely get it out, we also want to make sure that we're regulating our nervous system afterwards. We want to nurture ourselves as much as we want to release that tension. So we're going to go cuddle farm pigs so that we can help our bodies to settle down. And the great thing is you're going to get so much more out of that than just the experience. I have also written a guidebook, a digital workbook that will be sent to you afterwards. And on top of that, we've got an awesome swag bag. I have had a bunch of really wonderful sponsors. I'll be putting a thank you to my sponsors up on the page here soon. And that swag bag's gonna include a little something for everybody from some really wonderful smelly things. I think we're gonna have some cookies in there, um, some little mini flashlights that you could put on a keychain, all sorts of fun little things just to say thank you. Um, I can post the link to the event page. So if you are in the South Carolina area and that sounds like something you would love to do, tickets are on sale. And so you can check out my website, www.natashadurandmoulton.com. All one word, natashadurandmoulton.com. That'll take you there. A pop-up will come up for the tickets. Just click on that. It'll take you straight to the ticket site. So hopefully I will see you all there. And if not, feel free to have a good scream at home. So thank you all for joining me as usual. I will likely see y'all next week. I am going to try to start making the lives at least a weekly thing. Because again, I love the feature where Substack like goes through and picks out my best pieces and puts it in some promotional material for me. Um, but as always, much love to everybody here. I will see you all next week.